Good evening and welcome back to our final study in the book of Genesis. Let me share with you, please, a prayer from Psalm 115, verse 1. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory because of your steadfast love and faithfulness. Well, let's go ahead and begin. Go right to our slides. Chapters 46 through 50, Israel settles in Egypt. And we have here the class bully, Mo, shoving Calvin. He says, "Out of my way, Twinkie." Calvin looks around, helpless, hopeless. And he says, "And suddenly the earth opened up." Wailing helplessly, Mo tumbled head over heels down the smoking chasm until he splashed into the molten magma at the planet's core, where he slowly melted before igniting in a spitting fireball of grease. And he walks away bitterly. Well, I wanted to share a little bit of a dialogue from the 1982 film Gandhi. And let me just make sure that everyone knows when I quote from a film or an author, I'm not endorsing everything the author believes or the movie portrays. But I do think that there's a quotation or a story that's worthy of our consideration. So in the movie, there's a Christian minister, Charlie Andrews, and Gandhi, and they're walking down the street in Pretoria, and they're confronted by three young thugs. The first one throws a cigarette down at Gandhi's feet and then reaches to haul him off the pavement. And at that moment, there's a woman calls down from an upstairs window, and it's the young man's mother, and she tells him to get to work. She doesn't like what she's seen. So the crisis passes, and Charlie says, "That was lucky." And Gandhi says, "I thought you were a man of God." And Charlie says, "I am, but I'm not so egotistical as to think he plans his day around my dilemmas." So it raises a question, more than one, I guess. How much does God intervene in human affairs? How involved is he? Will the bully get his comeuppance? And while the ways of God are inscrutable, beyond our sight, so much, still the scripture teaches us about his plans and purpose. So chapter 46, God reassures Jacob. Israel, comes to Egypt, and the father is reunited with his son. Jacob leaves home with all he has. He comes to Beersheba and offers sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And the Lord reassures the aged traveler, as throughout the book, in times of risk or danger, God gives reassurance. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." And he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make of you a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes." So Jacob and all his family descendants come to Egypt, some 70 strong. Now that number varies a little bit in the Bible. The numbers of his household, members of his household vary, and different explanations have been offered. For example, 70 may just be rounded off to represent all Israel. In Genesis 46:21, Benjamin is said to have 10 sons, though he is still a young man. Now, perhaps he had several wives, or the list may be anticipatory. Some of the sons are grandsons that will be expected. The family arrives in the land of Goshen. Jacob sends Judah to bring the great ruler of Egypt, Joseph, to him there. Then Joseph harnessed his chariot, went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. As soon as he appeared before him, he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long while. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Joseph instructs his brothers and father's house to tell Pharaoh they are shepherds, keepers of livestock, so they can live in Goshen, separate from the Egyptians, who consider every shepherd an abomination. The Egyptians may abhor shepherds because they kill their animals in sacrifices, offerings, rather than worship them. They may consider the Israelite view of human superiority over the animal world as an abomination, a deep violation of Egyptian belief in the unity, if not the interchangeability, of man, nature, and the divine. In other words, they see Pharaoh as a god. They worship the sun. But Pharaoh is not a god. Neither is the sun, the Nile River, or cattle. Fundamental to Genesis is the hierarchical structure of the universe, the clear distinctions God made in ordering reality at the beginning. God placed the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, to separate the light from the darkness. But the heavenly bodies are not divine. God put them there. And he made every living creature according to its kind. And so this abundant, distinctive variety in creation, he says, is good. And God gave us, humans, dominion over the fish, birds, animals, reptiles, over all the earth. Yet we are not God. He alone is sovereign deity. But we alone image God, reflect God, represent God on earth. The Creator has put us in charge, made us caretakers of his world. And then this from Cass. The God of Israel will declare abominable or loathsome the practices of Egypt and Canaan. This is Leviticus 18. Those activities that deny or efface the fundamental distinctions of creation. Child sacrifice, which makes a child into an animal. Bestiality, which makes an animal into a human being. Homosexual male sodomy, which makes a man into a woman. And idolatry, which makes an animal or a man or some other creature into a god. So what God has ordered, let not man disorder. What God has put in order, placed in order, let not man throw out of whack. What God has made separate, let not man obliterate. What God has designed, let not man dismantle. And what God has made holy, let not man desecrate. What God has sanctified, let us not profane. To undo what God has done is to take us back to chaos. Well, chapter 47, Israel settles in Egypt, and Joseph buys Egypt for Pharaoh. Joseph brings five of his brothers before the king, and Pharaoh says, "The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen." And then Joseph presents his father to Pharaoh, and this elderly man of God blesses the monarch of Egypt. And Pharaoh asks Jacob's age, and he says, "The days of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of my life." And the word evil there means difficult. Well, Jacob blesses Pharaoh again and leaves his presence, and Joseph settles his family in Goshen. Well, Jacob has been a sojourner, a wanderer. He's had a hard life, yet he does not want pity or special favors from Egypt. It is rather Pharaoh who needs a blessing, who needs divine assistance. And then these words from Morgenstern. This incident symbolizes the triumph of the spiritual over the temporal and the material, of eternal truth over evanescent might and power, over political influence. Before the dignity of old age, knowledge, and experience, and the wisdom which comes from God alone, even the king upon his throne must bow. The famine is grievous. Joseph sells the people grain, gathers all the money, the silver, in Egypt and Canaan, and gives it to Pharaoh. Joseph then takes the Egyptians' livestock for another year's supply of food. And then next year, the people come back with nothing left but their land and themselves, which they offer to Joseph. Buy us and our land for bread, and we with our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die. So Joseph buys all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. He makes slaves of the people from one end of Egypt to the other. He says, behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Sow the land and give a fifth to Pharaoh. Meanwhile, in Goshen, the family of Israel gains possessions and multiplies exceedingly. Time goes by, Jacob nears death. He tells Joseph, do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt. Joseph says yes, and Jacob binds him with an oath. So Jacob is calling his son back to their roots in Canaan, to the covenant of God, the promise and pledge of God to his forefather Abraham. Chapter 48, Jacob blesses Joseph's sons. After these things, Joseph is told, your father is ill. And he takes Manasseh and Ephraim to Jacob's bedside. Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz, which is the Canaanite name of Bethel, in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. Jacob then adopts Joseph's two sons, who will become tribes, and reminds him of his mother's death on the way to Ephrath or Bethlehem. Jacob hugs and kisses the two boys and says to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also. He then blesses them, placing his right hand on Ephraim, giving preference to the younger son. Where have we seen that before? The God before whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you. And the little pronoun you there is plural, with you all, and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Chapter 49, Jacob blesses the 12 sons. Jacob gathers his sons for blessings in days to come, anticipating their future as tribes of Israel. The firstborn, Reuben, is denied preeminence because he violated his father's marital bed. And then the next two, Simeon and Levi, will be scattered because of their fierce anger and cruel wrath at Shechem. Simeon will be absorbed into Judah, and of course the descendants of Levi will live in specific cities in each of the territories allotted to the other tribes. Jacob says, O my soul, come not into their counsel. O my spirit, be not joined to their company. Judah rises in preeminence. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons, your brothers, shall bow down before you. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the nations, Israel's enemies. And so it's through Judah that the monarchy of David will come, King David, and the promised Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. Zebulun will profit from the sea trade, as far as I can tell from a brief reading of this study. Issachar will have fertile land, yet become slaves to the Canaanites. Again, I'm guessing and thinking that's correct, hopefully. Dan, a weak tribe, will be forced to adopt guerrilla tactics like a serpent and viper that bites a horse and throws its rider. Gad will be able to retaliate against invaders. Asher will enjoy abundant prosperity. Naphtali also will flourish. And then we come to Joseph. Joseph will be fruitful, steady under attack, his arms made agile by the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel, the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. So the Joseph tribes will suffer severe attack, but they will have God's protection. Also, during the period of the judges, they will have a leadership role. And finally, Benjamin will be like a ferocious, warlike tribe. So Jacob blesses the future tribes of Israel, each with an appropriate blessing. That's ESV Study Bible. He commands his family to bury him with his fathers in the cave at Machpelah in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burying place years ago. And of course, there are buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife, Isaac and Rebekah, his wife, and the weak-sighted, or is it warm-sighted, Leah. When Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Chapter 50. Joseph buries his father in Canaan and reassures his brothers. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. He commands the physicians to embalm his father, and Egypt mourns for him 70 days. Joseph receives permission from Pharaoh to bury his father in Canaan. The servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household and of Egypt, as well as the households of Joseph and Jacob, make the long journey. Jacob's sons bury their father in the cave at Machpelah, and I have the general location there circled. Then the great company returns to Egypt. So Jacob does not die an Egyptian. Bury me not in Egypt. He will remain a son of the covenant, an heir of God's promises to Abraham and Isaac in the land of promise. When Joseph's brothers see that their father is dead, they say, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. They send a message to Joseph, saying their father had given them this command. Say to Joseph, forgive, I pray you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. Joseph weeps when he hears these words. His brothers again fall before him. We are your slaves, they say. But Joseph said to them, do not fear. Am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. The word comfort there, I think, means speak to the heart. Joseph remains in Egypt and lives to see his great grandchildren. He tells his brothers then, I'm about to die, but God will surely visit you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, calling them back. Joseph makes his brothers swear to carry up his bones from Egypt. He dies at 110. Genesis 50:20 provides a good summary of the Joseph story. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Neither scheming brothers nor imperial power can resist the purpose of God. God has a plan for his people, and that plan will not be defeated. So to wrap up, I want just briefly to share an overview of Genesis and some themes from the book. Chapters 1 through 11 is the primeval history that Mark talked about, primeval, first age or first ages. And then the second part of Genesis, chapters 12 through 50, is God's call, God's promises, covenant with the patriarchs. And we have the stories of Abraham and Sarah, chapters, and then also Isaac, chapters 12 through 26. Jacob, there's some overlap, chapters 25, 27 through 36. And then the Joseph cycle, which has to include Judah, chapters 37 through 50. So some themes. The foundational origin stories, chapters 1 through 11, shape our understanding of reality, and they orient us to our Creator. Genesis lays the foundation for two critical questions. Who am I? And why am I here? And finally, one more Calvin and Hobbes. Miss Wormwood is at the front of the classroom. She says, if there are no questions, we'll move on to the next chapter. And a voice, student, I have a question. Certainly, Calvin, what is it? What's the point of human existence? I meant any questions about the subject at hand. Oh, frankly, I'd like to have the issue resolved before I expend any more energy on this. That's a good question. I've thought about it a lot. And this insight from Anthony Eslin, if we are only dust or brutes, if we have no free choice and the world has no meaning, then life is merely absurd and drama is impossible. The Christian faith is a drama. I mean, we are headed somewhere, and what we do matters. There's significance. The Christian message is that we are dust destined for glory or misery, that we are made in the image of the utterly free God, that God is present and at work fully in every millimeter of space and every moment of time, and that time is the moving shadow of eternity. It's from his book, How the Church Has Changed the World, Volume 1. So back to the themes. Number 2, and these aren't in any special order. God is transcendent. He's sovereign, Lord and King, ruler of the universe, as well as immanent. He's near to us, dear to us, responsive to us and our needs. And number 3, the pervading reality of sin, disregard and disobedience to our Maker. And in his response, in punishment, love, and renewal. That's why Abraham was chosen. Number 4, God blesses, covenants, and promises. But these promises, these pledges, are constantly under threat. They're in jeopardy. They delay, yet they are still kept. They are still honored. And number 5, we see the guidance and presence of God at work behind the scenes, ever present, exceedingly present. He is strong to preserve, provide, protect, and sustain. I want to mention before I came to Brentwood, I worked for the Hillcrest Church of Christ in Arlington. And back in 1975, Hillcrest pioneered the World Bible Translation Center, which produced the first English version for the deaf and then the easy to read version of the Bible. It has produced 20 translations, some 20 translations of the Bible and 30 translations of the New Testament in different languages around the world. It's published millions and millions of Bibles. And one of the elders' wives was talking to me about the early days and the challenges they faced, the place that they had to secure, equipment to buy, maintain, the salaries to pay, and how they ran out of money. Deadlines loomed, they were out of money. And then somehow, just in time, the same day, a check came in the mail. That happened more than once. And so we experienced the gracious providence of God. God is ever faithful, ever worthy of our trust. Even when his promises are in jeopardy and his people are endangered in spite of surface conditions, external circumstances, God will honor his promises, accomplish his purposes in his way for our good and for his glory. Go in the grace of God.